Hello, I'm Jerry Crosby, and I am here with the Chico Steak Life Sketches webcast. And today we're going to be interviewing Robin Cook. And I'm super excited because Robin is a person with purpose in her life. So we will begin just by looking at where it all started. Where did you grow up, Robin?
I grew up in Gridley, California, so the opposite end of the county that we're, down in the South County, and that's where my family's been for a couple generations now.
And Gridley's a small town. What was life like growing up there?
Lots of family, lots of members of the church, you would do something silly on your way home from school and your mom would know about it before you walked in the door because somebody would have let her know. And so it was a real sense of community, everybody looking out for each other all the time and keeping an eye out for one another. If there was a car in the parking lot at the hospital, phone calls were going, trying to figure out what had happened and what was happening in people's lives, really connected to one another. Yeah.
And you pointed out you had a kind of unique family. Can you tell us a little bit about your blended family?
Yeah, it was funny. I didn't know I was a blended family until I was in 6th grade. My teacher had us do a family tree, and my dad had been married to a lady named Barbara Quist, and they married very young. She was still in high school. They got married out in the Salt Lake Temple. She graduated with both of my brothers in tow. And then they had 4 boys all together. And then she passed away. And a few years later, he married my mom, who had not been married. She was living in Sacramento, worked for California Youth Authority in a pilot program, bringing education into the juvenile hall system. And they got married. They had the 4 boys. They started having all girls after that. So there were 3 girls. So we have a 10-year gap between the boys and the girls. And it wasn't until I had to try to put all that on a family tree that I realized there wasn't a spot for Barbara and for all of the Quist side of my family. And my teacher was trying to explain to me that, well, they're step brothers and that's not really your grandparents. And I wasn't really having any of it.
So how many brothers and sisters do you have total?
So I have 4 brothers and 2 sisters. So there's 7 of us total. And Barbara's family, there was also 7 kids. And most of those kids and their kids all lived in Gridley with us. And so they were the side of the family that I knew the best. The rest of my family was in Sacramento, my dad's and my mom's side. My dad's dad lived in Gridley for most of his life. But at that point, when I was a little kid, he was in Sacramento with his wife. And so so I grew up with my dad's first wife's family, not realizing that was odd or different in any way.
And how did having this blended family change your understanding of how eternal families function?
Well, when Barbara passed away and the boys and my dad were on their own, my understanding is that my grandpa Quist, Barbara's dad, came to my dad and said, these boys really need a mom. And that's what really encouraged my dad to start dating again and figure out what he was going to do with all these boys. And when my sister was born, she's just older than me, my grandpa Quist came to the hospital and put his arm around my dad and said, these kids are my kids as much as anybody else, right? And so he had a strong faith in the covenant and in the principle of eternal family, the idea that, if we are sealed together, then we are family and there's no question about bloodlines or anything else. And so it was really his example, his inclusion of my sisters and my mother that set that tone for the rest of my life. My Quist side of the family has always had a huge role in my growing up. They were there at every moment of my life. I don't remember any time where those aunts and uncles and cousins weren't part of who I was and part of every, they were like my T-ball teammates. They were my high school friends. They were everything. And if it wasn't for Grandpa Quist's kind of belief in the concept of eternal family, I don't think it would have been that way.
That's a bit magical.
Yeah,
that's lovely.
It was incredible.
So both of us, when we were younger, did not have lots of things to entertain us. There weren't the iPhones and tablets. What did you do in your hometown for fun?
For fun? Lots of bike riding. Lots of playing whatever pickup sport in somebody's front yard, lots of that stuff. Lots of staying out till, past dark and trying to get home before we got in trouble. Lots of ditches and to run around in. My grandparents had a ditch right by their house. And if there was water in it, we were throwing rocks in it. If it was dry, we were down in it, running up and down it, looking at the nests that the birds would build underneath the little bridge that went over the street. We were just outside all the time. It's a farming community down there. And so a lot of kids are just outside all the time. And that was no different for me. Yeah.
Good. That's always fun.
Yeah.
And where did you end up going to college?
Stayed local. My siblings all went to BYU, Idaho, which was Rick's college back then. And they would tell these stories when I was little. They were headed off to college when I was, like in grammar school, some of them, and they would tell stories about their nose hair freezing and things like that. I just was like, I wanted no part of it from a very young age. And so when it came time to make that decision to go to school, I decided to stay here and go to Butte College. I was dating Josh at the time, so no real desire to leave the area. And so, we went to Butte, and we were on the speech and debate team, and at Chico State and at Butte College, and stayed local.
Well, and we need to talk both about, I said you had a purpose-driven life, and I think that started for you maybe even in high school, but certainly at Butte College. Mm-hmm. And then we have to get into your whole Josh story because it's charming. But how did purpose become part of what you were doing in your college life?
Right. Well, in elementary school, I had a lot of learning disabilities and had a very hard time learning to read, and struggled in school a lot, was held back in fourth grade, spent a lot of time in special ed classes, trying to just learn how to keep up with my peers. And somebody had taught me sign language. Pat Shire actually was the one who started a club on campus and taught sign language. And I picked it up really fast and really just loved it. And so fast forward a couple more years, I was doing way better in school. It had all finally clicked. One of my teachers just unlocked my brain for me, and everything suddenly flowed. I was top of my class and doing really well, and was very much aware of the kids who weren't. The kids who were still struggling, my peers, my classmates, the people I was in classes with. And so I started a program where we started volunteering at the deaf school. And because just kind of marrying that love for sign language and kids and this desire to serve and provide something so everybody could participate in. And so I volunteered a ton and got other kids to come with me and volunteer a bunch. And we did a ton of activities and stuff. That led to winning a national award for service. And so that's kind of where it really started. And then as a college student, Josh was the student body president. So, going to student body council meetings, that kind of stuff just was something I kind of was tagging along with a little bit. He was my ride to and from Gridley, and back before we were married, and he was already student body president then. So there was a position for student trustee that was open. So you got to sit on the board of trustees at the college as the student representative. And so I ran for that and won it, and was doing that when the governor called and asked if I would become a member of the California Student Aid Commission. And that was a commission that helped write financial aid policy for all of the students in California, for all of the Cal Grants and loan programs that California administers, as well as federal programs that they administer. And so I knew nothing about it, right? What do I know about financial policy? I wasn't a banking major, or I wasn't even good at my own finances, but they invited me to be a part of it. And I thought, if nothing else, I'm going to learn from all these incredible board members that I'll get to rub shoulders with and learn how to be on a board. And so jumped at that chance, and yeah.
Well, and you and Josh have been jumping at chances for a long time. And that's awesome. That's really great, the kind of work you guys do. But let's take a step back and talk a little bit about you and Josh and how your relationship grew and developed.
Yeah. Yeah. So Josh was, he lived down the street from me my whole life, right? His parents were converts, and his mom got baptized when she was about 8 months pregnant with Josh. And so as a new member of the church, everybody was really excited to have her in the church and have her there. And then she was also expecting. So there was this whole thing we could rally around the new member, right, with this pregnancy. And so my mom had taken a casserole over to his mom when Josh was born. And so she returned the favor when I was born. So we love to tell everybody that Josh was at my house within days of me being born. And that's true. And then we can, from that moment, I would probably say from that exact moment, I'm guessing he probably stole my bottle or did something terrible to me that caused me to not like him. But pretty much from then on, we fought all the time growing up as kids. He was in the opposite ward as me. So the first ward kids would love to try to battle with the third ward kids. And we shared a building in Gridley, and there was like a little wall that went around a courtyard. And so primary, as soon as it was out, it was a contest for which ward had control of this little wall. And, you'd try to walk on it and push each other in the bushes if you were, whoever finished the path first was the ward that won for the week. So, it was all fighting, contests and competitions our whole life growing up. And he was in FFA and student body president, and I was an athlete. And so we just always were opposites forever, and weren't even allowed to cross the railroad tracks. We would go to the railroad tracks and throw rocks at each other across from the railroad tracks, but we weren't allowed to cross the railroad tracks and actually, physically fight. So that was probably a good thing. But we threw lots of rocks at each other.
So your parents did not let you guys be together as children.
Yeah. I probably had more to do with not crossing the railroad tracks as just a boundary, but we would, meet there and still scuffle and And his dad was my Sunday school teacher. At one point, there was a short amount of time where the ward boundaries switched and I ended up in his ward. And he was on a mission, and his dad would try to get our Sunday school class to write letters to all the missionaries. I was happy to write to any missionary but him. I would not write him any letters. So there's letters from his dad on his, while Josh was on his mission that says, I don't know what you did to this girl, but she will not even write you a letter. So you should probably apologize. And so that was just kind of how we grew up. And then he came home from his mission, and things were a little different.
Well, you have to tell us how everything changed.
Well, Gridley has a lot of LDS people in it, a lot of members of the church there. And so I had about 18 girls in my oldest class of young women. We called them Laurels back then. And so there were about 18 of us, which is a really huge compared to what we have right now in our young men's and young women's programs. But we were sitting together, and all of these girls had come to see Josh come home from his mission, and this huge welcoming home thing. And some of the girls were bummed because at this point we're seniors, and we were kind of hopeful that maybe we'd get a date. And some of the girls were really sad. And I jokingly said, out of everybody here, he's going to ask me out first, as a joke. And somebody said, I would pay to see that. Well, when the pot got up to like $100, I was like, I am getting this money. I'm going to win because I am crazy competitive. And so I started thinking, if I just flirt with him a little bit, of course he'll ask me out. But, that didn't happen. And he started dating other people and was off to college. And I thought, it's never going to happen. And he was eventually put in as my Sunday school teacher. So then I was absolutely certain he was never going to ask me out, and was so frustrated that I was going to lose this bet that was ongoing now for several months, that I just quit going to Sunday school. I was like, I can't face defeat. I don't take defeat well. And so I stopped going to Sunday school class, and eventually Josh got in trouble because his student was wandering the halls of the church. And so he came up to me and said, you have to come to class. And I was like, making up this entire story about my sister having to take a picture of a lit up building at night. And we were going to go to the Oakland Temple to do that. And I'd love to come to class, but we're leaving. And my parents are standing there wondering why my sister didn't tell them about the assignment. My sister's wondering what the heck's going on, but just going with it. And anyway, he ended up saying, if you'll come to class, I will drive you down there myself. And I thought, that's a date. I win. And so my sister went along with it and went with us to take the picture of the temple that she didn't actually need for school. And my parents decided they better come, or we'd probably kill each other on the way home, fighting and arguing as we always had. And they were like, for everyone's safety, we're coming. So I didn't care. I just was winning the money. And so that was, and
did you get your money?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I collected on that for sure.
Good girl.
Yeah. And it was the next day he called up, and his friends were all home from BYU, and they were headed to a Giants game. And I was like, I don't really like this guy, but I'm not turning down Giants tickets. So I went to the Giants game with them. And by the end of that day, it was over. I was like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. He's a pretty awesome guy. And So that's, it took a couple of tries, but he won me over pretty fast.
That is a great origin story.
Yeah.
And then your story goes on. You've had 5 lovely children.
Yeah.
Tell us about your babies.
Yeah. So we got married really quickly because we'd known each other for so long. There wasn't a lot of dating or anything going on there. So we got married. I think that all happened in Christmas break. It was Easter break was all of that craziness about the games and all that. So Easter break, we started dating. Then by the 4th of July, we were engaged, and by November, we were married, and we were off to college, Butte College, so we were just local. We moved to Chico, and about 3 years later is when we had our first kiddo. And so we had Reagan and then Riley right after, and Reagan, we used to tell people Reagan was like false advertising. She was like the easiest little baby that made you think like, we could have so many of these. This is so easy. But she was just a really easy, fun little baby and easy kid. And we've just been really, really lucky. Our kids have all been really fun. They're all incredibly different from one another. They couldn't probably be more different from one another if they tried, but they're amazing moms now, amazing women, amazing career women. I have an amazing son who's nothing but an adventure all the time. Even to this day, he just brings chaos and joy at every turn, and we love it. And then we have one left at home who's Moki, our youngest, is still home with us, and she is the tail that she's like 5 years behind her brother, and so she's a lot younger than some of her siblings, and they loved having her around as a little kid. Mm-hmm. And she was born early, so she kind of changed how we had to do things at home to take care of her and keep her protected and safe. We're a family that's very outgoing, and we had to really close down and shut down when she was little. And so that was a different experience and a really growing experience for all of us. But it taught us that we can rally around each other when we need to. And so my kids were amazing through all of that even. So. Yeah.
But Moki is very active now.
Oh, yeah.
You're back to being a fully active family.
Yeah. Moki is now the driving force of most activity. And yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you now have 5 grandchildren, Grandma.
Yeah.
What's that like for you?
It's fun. It's been amazing having grandkids. I kept hearing about that, right? Like, grandkids are the best. We have kids to have grandkids, that kind of thing. And there is something about not having that pressure that we put on ourselves as parents. I mean, we could have that probably kind of ease and joy as parents too, if we tried and just trusted more in Heavenly Father, and that things were going to work out and not felt so much obligation and pressure and that we feel as parents. But it's easy to let that go when you're a grandparent, right? It's easy to say, okay, it's gonna be all right. If they don't eat all of their dinner tonight, why have a war over that? But sometimes when you're a parent, you feel like you have to have a war over that. And so that part's been really fun to see how much just you can relax and enjoy just them, their little personalities. And yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, you and Josh have done a lot of work for both at the state level, sometimes even at the national level for the church. And this, again, goes back to that idea of a purpose-driven life. Now, I'm sure your family is your greatest purpose of all.
Yeah.
But can you talk to us a little bit about how that developed after college and how that worked for you in your life?
Yeah. When Josh was in college, he ended up taking a job with Congressman Herger. And so we got to know the Hergers really well. And as I was having Reagan, they offered me a job. So I was pregnant with Reagan, and I got a job with the congressman working in his office. And I was working there for a while and ended up just kind of doing more current events for him, like keeping him up on what was happening throughout his district, reading a ton of newspapers, like tons of newspapers, and clipping out things that were important and making sure he got that information all the time. And so I did that for a few years, just keeping up on what was going on all over the district for him. And that really kind of helped lead and inform a lot of what I was doing. It's easy to get stuck in a bubble and to think about just our own friends and our own wards, our own callings, our own things, our own little worlds. But when you're having to keep somebody like a congressman informed, you have to look beyond that a little bit. And so being able to do that as a career, right, getting paid to stay informed, really helped me realize there's so much going on out there. There's so many places where people are needed, and where you can give help, and where you can give advice or give a perspective that maybe they don't already have. And so that really helped launch a lot of things that we have done, since then.
And do you see this work out in the community as kind of an extension of your church work as well? Oh,
yeah, for sure. Right? A stake president's a stake president over everybody, right? Whether they're members or not members. And that's really, it's like my grandfather's vision of like a family is a family, and that's defined by Heavenly Father, not by courts or blood, right? And so community and family and church, it's all just an extension of each other. And so when you're serving Heavenly Father's children. It doesn't matter whether they show up to this building or not on Sunday. They're still Heavenly Father's children. And He's reaching them in whatever way He can, whether that's here in our building, or that's at a homeless shelter, or that's at a political rally. Wherever He's able to reach, he's reaching. And so wherever Heavenly Father is working, that's where I want to be. I want to be reaching with Him. I want to be right there. And so it doesn't matter really what we're doing. It's always an opportunity to share testimony and to love people and to get to know them and share time with them.
And what are some of the committees you've worked on?
Well, like I did the stuff I did in college. I've also been on the Gridley Unified School District Board when we lived down in Gridley. And then I've been on the Fair Board now for a very long time. When I count up the years, I'm amazed how fast they've flown by, but I think I'm getting close to 18 or 19 years on that board. So just different boards and callings. And on the charter school board up in Forest Ranch when my son was there. I'm on some of the committees at the high school where my daughter attends. So just wherever my kids are, or wherever, the church is working, whatever is going on, I try to see where I can help.
I think here in California in particular, there are a lot of church members who are very tentative about getting involved in politics because they see it as coming from a very different moral base than our religious base.
Right.
How do you reconcile what must be at times people who have a very different viewpoint than your own? And what would you tell people to do?
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of people who believe very strongly, very differently than we do. And you would think that would be a place where there's a rub, where there's hard feelings or where there's hurt feelings. And there can be. But a lot of times it's just taking the time to say, your opinion matters too, right? When somebody's coming at us from a totally different perspective or experience, right? Their experience is still really valuable, and probably somewhere between what I think and what they think is the right decision. There's no one person that has all the answers, right? And it's in finding that balance between everybody's beliefs and experiences and perspectives that you make the best decisions for a community. Because if we're all one side, or we're all the other side, or we're all one extreme, or we're all the other extreme, or we all think the same way, there's no balance in that. And we learn that in the scriptures, right? There has to be opposition in all things. There has to be balance. And there has to be that kind of, that ability to accept one another. And so, I don't have to agree with somebody to work with them in any way, shape, or form. Matter of fact, some of the best work I do is when I don't agree with somebody, when they challenge me, when they get me to think and experience things from their point of view, and they're willing to listen to my point of view. And it's when you find those partners with that willingness to work together, that's where like the real magic happens. Yeah.
And so listening and really being open.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. And sharing your point of view as if it's not the only point of view, right? Like, this is my belief. This is how I find Christ. This is how I find my Heavenly Father. This is where I feel the Spirit. Where do you feel it? How does that work for you? And being open to listening to what that means to them.
And have you had opportunities to share your spiritual feelings in these more community or political settings?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. That's my favorite part, is when it crosses over to that. When I was at Butte College, I was very pregnant with Reagan. Very could not fit behind a desk pregnant, right? It had to sit sideways. It was very obvious. and it was an interesting reaction among the students, finding out as they talked to me that I was married, that this was a planned pregnancy, that this was part of what my husband and I wanted in our lives, right? That just knowing that family was important at a time when they were teaching very strongly. My marriage and family class at Butte College, he absolutely believed that if you lived together before, or you had to live together before you were married, and you should have lived together for 10 years until you're already common law married, then you might as well go ahead and tie yourself up to this legal mess of marriage, right? That was his belief system. And I'm right there in the front row, 9 months pregnant, barely 20 years old, 21 years old or something, and raising my hand saying, well, actually, that's not the thing that brings the most happiness, right? And knowing sources of data that are outside of just the scriptures, and being able to say, well, actually, this article in GQ last week said, right, which I knew because I was working for the congressman, and actually this article over here, and hey, actually this book teaches these other things. And it wasn't that I was trying to discredit him or challenge him. I just was like, well, wait, how do you teach this only one piece of data when there's lots of data sets that give lots of information? And other students in the classroom were, hearing that too, and having that debate and that open conversation about what really is the choice that they want to make for their lives, where, they might have just said, oh, our professor said so it must be true. And,
so as well as listening and accepting and loving, you also have to be informed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 And be willing to share, and be willing to have people not agree with you and be okay with that. Yeah. Yeah. So it was places like that. It's, getting invited to say the prayer at city council meetings, and being able to pray in public for the city council, or times when you're with people of other faiths and just saying, tell me all about what you believe. Tell me what your faith is all about. And they inevitably will ask about yours, right? And so then you have a chance to go, oh, that we have that in common. I didn't realize that, we had so much in common with the Sikh religion, for example. At the Temple Open House, it was hard not to learn about all of the commonalities between the two religions, and just absolutely amazing to see those, right? Their beliefs and our beliefs, and where they line up, and where they were different, and why they were different, and how that works for them, and maybe how that could, inform my own beliefs better. So, yeah.
And you and Josh have an interesting calling because you're chaplains.
We
for
are.
the church, which is a little unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Josh has this ability to be curious about everything. He just can't let things go very well. And we were up at Simpson College, and he was getting ready to give a speech at Simpson College at their graduation. And while he was standing backstage, he's fidgety. He's nervous. And he's fidgety even when he's not nervous, but he's just fidgety. And he's looking at all of these brochures on a counter. And one of them is Be a Chaplain. And he's like, wait, do we have chaplains? How does this work exactly? So he pulls up their brochure, he looks at it, and being Josh, he comes home the next day and calls a number he finds for the church headquarters in Salt Lake and says, do we have chaplains? Like, is this something we do? Because this piques my interest, and what does that look like? And so they passed him on to the military department, and that kind of started us down this road of Josh wanting to become a chaplain for the military. And he was eventually and was assigned to a Jewish rabbi, because they didn't know what to do. They were like, I don't know, we have a Mormon and a Jewish guy, let's just throw them together and see what happens. They're not Protestants, they're not Catholics, I don't know what they are. And so he spent several years serving with Matt Friedman, a Jewish rabbi, and it was about the time that Moki was getting baptized, and so at her baptism we had a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and a Mormon. And it was just the funniest. I mean, the front row was hilarious. And, but it was fun to get to share. That was where we really started to see how we can share with other faith traditions, right? And be a part of other faith traditions. And we got to do all kinds of stuff. Some things we got to do as a family, when units would deploy and it was Christmas time and they're missing their dads, and, my kids would dress up and my husband would dress up and be part of their celebrations for Christmas. When families would come home, we'd get to be there to welcome them. We'd hug them as they were leaving, that kind of stuff. But his work with those were a little more, the parts where he did by himself were more of the death notifications after suicides. He got to do a lot of counseling with families, remembering their loved ones that were killed in action. Because as those anniversaries come around, sometimes you wonder 5 years later, does anybody care that my child died to save your child? And so he's the guy that's there helping them remember that we still care, we still know, we still feel your hurt and pain. And so him and the rabbi got to do a lot of that ministering that we talk about in the gospel in a very real way out in the community to people who really needed some ministering from someone who knew and understood where they were. And then along with that, he got lots of military training, which was always just comical because he's not the most routine guy in the world. And so he'd come home with really funny stories about marching platoons into walls and, things that my kids really love to hear about. And so, but it was really fun getting to support him through that, getting to participate where we could, and then supporting him when he would come home from those harder assignments that we weren't able to join him on, helping him just feel that was hard and it was important and it was good, and giving him the space to kind of do that. Now he's a chaplain for the sheriff's department. So he gets to work with Sheriff Honey, who is amazing. We all love Sheriff Honey. And so he gets to work both with the families that have tragedies happen in their lives and the officers who have to respond to those tragedies. And so that's something we get to do together and, support our community that way.
You could go on for a really, really long time because your family is very involved in so many things. And it's one of the things I really respect and appreciate about you. One last thing, that if you could think of one other event that has really shaped your sense of service and the community here, what would that be?
So the humanitarian department of the church has always been something I've really admired about our faith and our traditions. The idea that everybody gives what they can in fast offerings, and that has come together in this multi-million-dollar program that's allowed to help, right? I first got really fascinated by the program when they started doing grants for students, right? Because that's where I started, right? I started in this grant world of how do we help people get educated. And so knowing that they have a program that helps people from third world countries get an education in an affordable way, I thought was absolutely incredible, which led me to find out more and more. And right now I work with the Bishop's Storehouse. And in that capacity as an area communications person and a missionary out at the storehouse and a chaplain missionary and all of these things kind of merging together, and even young women's, right? My stake calling as a young women's leader, all of it kind of merges together out there where we're serving families in and outside of our church. It's that inward and outward facing opportunities to serve. And the church has a really robust program for writing grants to community organizations. And we as a stake have supported the Torrey Shelter, the Jesus Center, Chat, Chico State Food Pantry, Butte College Food Pantry, all of these incredible organizations full of the most amazing people in our community who are lifting up the people who are hurting the most, people with mental illnesses and addiction issues and things. And it's so amazing to be able to just marry my church work with my community work out there, to be able to say, look at what we can do as a church organization to help support other organizations that are doing amazing work. We're not having to take it over. We're not running the Jesus Center. Amber's doing an amazing job over there. She doesn't need us to get in her way, but she does need support. She does need help. She does need volunteers and financial support, and be able to take the resources of the Bishop's Storehouse and the resources of the church and help support their programs and help them lift as they're lifting others out of some really difficult situations has probably been my favorite part of what I've gotten to do, because it's just a marriage of all of these things that have led up to that ability to do it. So it's been my greatest joy writing grants for the Chico Steak and getting grants from the church to help support these organizations and getting to know the people who run those organizations, and then watching members of the church serve in those organizations. I asked some of the youth what it's been like serving dinners at the Tories, and every one of them talked first about the opportunity they had to do it with their family. But they got to go with their mom or their dad and serve side by side with them. And I can't help but think that that's what our Savior would do. That if he was here, he would be at the Tory shelter, serving right along with our youth and our families as we help the people who need it the most. That's where he was when he was in Jerusalem, was in those places. And so it feels like the culmination of all of the years of learning and putting myself out there and jumping in when I didn't think I had the talent or the time to do it. It's kind of all come together in this ability to help support all these organizations and watch our church really grow into that capacity. So, yeah.
Thank you for your example and for living a Christ-centered life. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Just a Jewish rabbi and a Mormon, and it was just the funniest. I mean, the front row was hilarious, and but it was fun to get to share. That was where we really started to see how we could share with other faith traditions, right, and be a part of other faith traditions, and we got to do all kinds of stuff. Some things we got to do as a family, like when units would deploy and it was Christmas time and they're missing their dads, and my kids would dress up and my husband would dress up and be part of their celebrations for Christmas. When families would come home, we'd get to be there to welcome them. We'd hug them as they were leaving, that kind of stuff. But his work with those were a little more, where the parts where he did by himself were more of the death note